Good afternoon. How you're all doing? Good. So this is you, and you are all there is. I would like to welcome you all with all my heart. God lives within you as you. I will repeat it. God lives within you as you. This is a great Shaivite teaching from the great monistic school of Shaivism. And it was told to me, and I'm passing that to you. It's what I call the amazing hypothesis, that actually we are all that unity which we are seeking every moment of our lives. We are already that. You may say, okay, then we can go home. Yeah. We're already home. We're already there. You are consciousness, you're consciousness, you're consciousness, you're consciousness. I'm not going to go around the room. And I'm consciousness, and you're consciousness. Undivided consciousness. This is what I call the amazing vision. The universe is conscious. The first thing, as Don Hoffman so eloquently told us before, I would say is start from the highest. Don't start from the lowest. My favorite example is if you want to build a great cathedral like the Notre Dame de Paris, which is probably my most favorite Gothic cathedral, you don't just gather a bunch of stones and a bunch of stained glass and a bunch of icons or whatever, statues, put them together randomly, and there you got Notre Dame de Paris. It doesn't work that way. You know that. How do you form anything in life? You start from the vision. You start from the highest. So where have we gone? Why have we assumed this paradigm that somehow the parts make the whole rather than the whole manifests the parts? The whole manifests the parts. Just turn around the vision. Change your glasses. You don't have to change your glasses. If this paradigm works for you, you're already home. But apparently, it's not working for a lot of us, this paradigm of division. So, this is what I call the amazing vision. It's not very profound, but it's actually the most profound thing in the universe. Why it's not very profound? Because it's the only thing that there is. So, we have a mix-up of reality, which in the ancient schools, as Deepak said, it was called the Maya. It's an appearance. It is all a reflection in the mirror of consciousness. It's an appearance. Les apparents trompent, as the French say. The appearances lead us astray. We're mixing the image with the real thing. What is the real thing? Undivided and differentiated consciousness. Why do we need a new science? Maybe we need a new science just to put it all together. Our current science has gone a long way. I'm a scientist. I publish. I enjoy doing science. But somehow we have believed the myth of division too much. So Deepak, at the very beginning, said the two most important questions. What is reality? What is the real nature of the universe? And what is consciousness? These are number one and number two. I forgot which is number one and number two, but it doesn't matter. There's the top questions that everybody's asking. And in fact, science, as it is now, doesn't really have answers. I'm not advocating, I'm a scientist, I'm not advocating to get rid of science. I'm advocating to enlarge it and make it what it always was, a way of knowing. Knowing what? Know thyself. You're already there. So we're taking all these workshops, and we're going to the universities, and we're taking all these courses. We're having a lot of fun. As long as we're having fun, it's fine. But if we're trying to get there, the train has already arrived. In fact, the train never left. In fact, there's no space and time. It's all a construct in our awareness consciousness. So the proposal is as follows. It's actually quite simple. The proposal is start with foundational principles. And I do agree with Don that they must spring out of fundamental mathematics. Actually, I also agree with Stu Hameroff. It must be at the fundamental level, perhaps a pre-geometry or a pre-algebra, fundamental mathematics. We have some ideas. I'm not going to talk about the mathematics today. Actually, I'm sort of have been led to now view that it's not just one mathematics, but it is mathematical languages. And there are three principles. Now, I have to tell you that these principles have not come out of me. They have come out of discussions with many of you. I want to acknowledge Subhash Kak and my friend Neil Tice, my friend Subhash Kak. This morning, we did an amazing meditation. And the third principle, which we call sentience, it can also be called consciousness, and it can also be called awareness. I like the term awareness, actually. So we hopefully will be able to do more of that. And these principles have changed over the last several years. In fact, we were discussing it with my good friend Mihai Drăgănescu, who actually passed on to the other world. And we were playing with the idea of category theory. And some of these principles actually come out of category theory, if you want to be mathematically inquisitive. As you see, these three principles are complementarity. How does this work? Can you see there it is. Complementarity, recursion, and sentience. Let's put them in simple terms. Complementarity is yes and or no. And the next one actually shows what Niels Bohr had in mind. I'll read it to you in Latin. Contraria sunt complementa. The opposites are complementary. We're thinking of opposites, but Bohr said they're complementary. And or, not this but not that. So our world view is this but not that. Quantum mechanics tells us it is this and or that. Not at the same conditions, under the same conditions applying, but they're always there. They're all part of the ground of consciousness. So going back, the first one is complementarity. The second one is recursion. We see the same patterns over and over again. Just go outside, look at those flowers and the trees. You see the same patterns, right? They come out of nonlinear dynamics. Recursive. In quantum theory, recursion actually gives a structure. If you didn't have recursion, there would be no universe. There are 10 to the 80 particles in the universe. They're identical. And at the same time, they're not identical. They obey the Pauli exclusion principle. A lot of people have got confused about quantum theory. They say, quantum theory doesn't apply to macro levels. No, no, no. Everything applies at this level. Your eye can pick up individual photons. Your eye is a quantum detector. The Pauli exclusion principle is a quantum principle. It's not a classical principle. All the structures you see, chemical bonds, it's because of the Pauli exclusion principle. So I'm getting upset as a physicist. They say quantum theory has no relevance in the macro world. It does. Pauli exclusion principle, there will be no structure as we see it. There will be just spheres of gases, nebulae, called stars, held together by gravitational forces and electromagnetic radiation. Actually, that wouldn't even be balanced, because what causes the stars to hold together is thermonuclear reactions, which is a quantum phenomenon. So, anyway, I won't go on about that. You see what I'm saying? The third principle is sentience. And this is where, my friend Neil, we had a discussion, and he convinced me that we should use that. Sentience appears to be everywhere in the universe. It is the ability of molecules to bind together. It's the ability of atoms to bind together. It's the ability of us to communicate with each other. Actually, those three principles that you can see, they work together. They're like the Trinity. You cannot separate them. It's not complementarity, recursion, sentience. It's all of the above. Universal principles, in attempting to provide a bridge between today's science and the riddle of consciousness, because it is a riddle. We maintain that rather than studying consciousness as an object, which will never be solved, the hard problem is the impossible problem, one can study the properties of consciousness assigned to conscious process. These properties of consciousness are tied to foundational principles, which I mentioned before, the three principles. Actually, if you think about it, they're not the only principles. You can switch them around. They do come out of fundamental mathematics, and the fundamental mathematics we're talking about are pre-algebraic and pre-geometrical, and they apply to all levels. Here I say physical world, mental and living world. Really, there's only one world, the world of consciousness. So what we call physical, mental, biological, they're just different categories to talk about our own experience. In fact, Bohr said quantum theory is nothing more than a language in physics to communicate our range of experiences. That's what it is. Those principles manifest through qualia. So the new science we're talking about actually will be the science of qualia. If you think about it, or if you feel about it, the only thing, if such a thing exists, that you're really sure of is your own experience. Period. How does it work? From the undivided wholeness, through assuming limitations, the infinite has to become finite through a reflection on itself, through the universal principles, complementarity, recursion, and sentience, springing out of fundamental mathematics. Where are the mathematics? I know Deepak is going to ask me that. Of course, mathematics is in consciousness. It's not outside. Plato's cave is in the mind, is in consciousness. At the fundamental level, actually beyond the Planck level, springing out of this fundamental mathematics, you have eventually manifesting as qualia, and you get a primal object and subject, what in India the ancient sages call Prakriti, and Purusha. Primal nature and primal subject. The idea of an individual. It's not yet an individual, but an idea of an individual. And then the background of nature. Then eventually you get intellect, ego, and mind. We develop ordinary mathematics, and what, in fact, von Neumann would say, psychosomatic elements that manifest in the physical universe. So it's not the physical universe that manifests consciousness, it is consciousness that manifests the universe, and this is the principles. I will wrap it up by giving some teasers as to what I call the object-based science, which is the current one, versus the observer-based science. And we could use the term awareness. The reason I'm using observer-based science is because that's more familiar from the problem observation in quantum theory. So here are a couple of teasers. The self, what is it? So here you have, in the middle column, observer-based science, the new science we're advocating, and the object-based science, which is current science. What is the self? Universal consciousness, perfect eye awareness. Perfect eye awareness. Not awareness of the ego, but awareness beyond the objects, beyond the ego. On the right side, the self is the ego. That's it. And, of course, the ego doesn't even exist in many psychological systems. Another set, human being, mind, qualia, universe. Let's take qualia. What are the qualia? In the observer-based science, qualia are agents of experience and consciousness. Experience is all there is. And mysterious, the hard problem outside of science if you pursue object-based science. And finally, let me just use one last example. Science itself, what is it? In the observer-based science, as it is practiced today, is a human activity, a way for consciousness to study levels of reality. The observer-based science and the object-based science will be seen as complementary aspects of one and the other. But in current science, the science is the absolute truth. The only reality valid human activity to discover reality. I would submit to you that that is probably a limited view. So we're talking about expanding our horizons to where? To where they have always been. Thank you.
Where does Schrodinger's equation exist? Where are wave functions, probabilities? Where's the evolution of the equation in time? What's the location?
Good question. According to the traditional orthodox view of Bohr and as revised by von Neumann, the wave equation gives you the possibilities that something may happen. It doesn't tell you what will happen, but the various possibilities. It's a probability distribution.
But a probability distribution or a possibility, by definition, is non-local, right?
But first of all, it's non-local and requires sentient beings. What is the good of having probability theory if you have no sentient beings? I can't even imagine what that would be. So Schrödinger's wave function is in the mind.
That's what I wanted you to say. Okay. The other thing is a cubic centimeter of empty space has more mass energy than is required to create the universe 3 times over, I believe.
The tip of your finger contains approximately 10 to the 40th, 10 followed by 1 followed by 40 is 0, of mass energy compared to the entire, universe you're talking about, the 3% or whatever it is, of the regular matter.
So if we look at that as the quantum vacuum, can we?
Quantum vacuum, it is the quantum vacuum.
If we can look at that as the quantum vacuum, is the Big Bang happening right now?
Big Bang is happening at all times. In fact, what is all times? I was sharing with some of my friends that, in fact, we have done some work where we look at the evolution of time. What appears to be time is nothing more than the change of the so-called constants of nature. So the change of the
That
constants,
Stuart was talking about, the evolution of the constants.
the change of the constants, which of course happens in consciousness, gives the appearance of time. So you can actually, even time and space are not fundamental. They only appear to be fundamental.
So, of course, when you talk to physicists, they talk about only mass energy in the quantum vacuum.
Correct. Unmanifest. Unmanifest.
Unmanifest. But, you know, Stuart goes further when he talks about platonic values embedded and qualia embedded and all of that. Would you say that the quantum vacuum, therefore, other than just being mass energy, virtual, entangled, whatever, is also somehow organizing that energy into the experience of the universe?
But the vacuum, the quantum vacuum is not inert. It's not empty. It's not the vacuum that sometimes we say the empty sunya, the void without its conscious awareness. It's the awareness. But of course, when you look at it from the point of view of quantum physics, you don't see the awareness, and yet, because of the observation problem, it sneaks through. It's always there.
And I was getting at that because, in wisdom traditions, Vedanta, I'm sure in Shaivism also, the infinite space that we're in is referred to as Chit-Akash.
Right.
So it's not only virtual energy, but it's Chit, it's consciousness.
Consciousness, correct. It's active awareness, which is being, awareness, and completion itself.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Menas.
Good afternoon. How you're all doing? Good. So this is you, and you are all there is. And I'm passing that to you. It's what I call the amazing hypothesis, that actually we are all that unity which we are seeking every moment of our lives. We are already that. You may say, okay, then we can go home. Yeah. We're already home. We're already there. Favorite example is if you want to build a great cathedral like the Notre Dame de Paris, which is probably my most favorite Gothic cathedral, you don't just gather a bunch of stones and a bunch of stained glass and a bunch of icons or whatever, statues, put them together randomly, and there you got Notre Dame de Paris. It doesn't work that way. You know that. How do you form anything in life? You start from the vision. You start from the highest. I would like to welcome you all with all my heart. God lives within you as you. I'll repeat it. God lives within you as you. This is a great Shaivite teaching from the great monistic school of Chavis, and it was told to me, you are consciousness, you are consciousness, you are consciousness, you are consciousness. I'm not going to go around the room. And I am consciousness, and you are consciousness. Undivided consciousness. This is what I call the amazing vision. The universe is conscious. The first thing, as Don Hoffman so eloquently told us before, I would say is start from the highest. Don't start from the lowest. My